Thanks for being here. Let's all stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
President Daly.
Here.
Vice President McNall. Here. Trustee Clements. Here. Trustee Headland. Here. Trustee Valentine.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome. This is our first board meeting of the school year, which I was having a hard time believing, but I think it's true. And from what I can tell, things are going smoothly. So welcome back to everyone. The next Board of Education meeting will be scheduled for Tuesday, September 21st, which is next Tuesday at 7 p.m. right here in the auditorium. And the workshop topic is the MTSS plan, which is the something team safety.
Multi-tiered student support.
Multi-tiered student support plan. Thank you. And I will turn it over to Dr.
Sure.
Benante.
Thank you, Jen. Welcome to the members of our board and the members of the community who are with us this evening. Just a few quick updates. As Jen mentioned, it's been a great start to the school year. We have had a very smooth transition thus far. The weather has cooperated. The students are fully in, and it's been fairly uneventful aside from the usual excitement that comes with the start of the year. So we're very happy to have all of our students on campus. We're beginning the year very much as we ended last school year. And I just wanted to thank our faculty and staff for making and prioritizing their connections with our kids upon their return to school, as well as their participation and engagement at our 2 superintendent's conference days prior to the start of the school year, where we were able to really work with our staff and get into a level of detail with respect to our strategic coherence planning that I know Mr. Elder, Josh, will be providing an overview for the board on next month. So it's been a great start thus far. We're focused and we're excited to have our students on campus each day. As one point to set the stage for some work that we're going to be discussing as part of our goals for this year, I did want to circle back and revisit with the board the enrollment study that was completed last school year. And as you're aware, and I just have this up here, we engaged Western Suffolk BOCES in a comprehensive demographic enrollment and facilities analysis through the 1920 school year. And the board adopted the findings of this study on May 5th of 2020. Thus far, it's reasonable to question whether or not the results of the study or the findings held in the short term, given some of what we're experiencing or hearing about as folks are moving out of the city, they're moving upstate, we've seen that, and whether or not that impact and the economic impact of COVID is in any way altered or shifted the results or any of the analysis that was associated with the enrollment study that was completed really prior to COVID impacting our communities in the way that it has. So I'm pleased to report that thus far it does not appear to be the case. And I've provided you with just an overview of what the projected enrollment was within that enrollment study and what our actual enrollment is. And you'll see as you look through the chart that we're very close to where we were or where we were projected to be this school year, with a few exceptions of a couple of students here or there relative to their cohort size. So as a total, we were projected, we have, I should say, 794 students who are enrolled on our campus right now, and we were projected to have 786. So a difference of 8 students. But again, the model accounted for a certain migration trend each year, a migration pattern each year that seems to have held in our review. And given some of the other analyses that occurred, it does seem like while we've had many new students enroll, that's occurring somewhat regularly. It's typical with what we've experienced in previous years. We've had some students leave. Again, it's typical for what we've seen generally in previous years. And we'll continue to monitor this, but in the short term, it does not appear that the enrollment figures are discrepant in any way. Now, it's important when we have an enrollment study, again, that we have a process for reviewing it each year, and that's incorporated into our regular office procedures out of the district office. And I'll just ask you to recall that the enrollment study did not suggest that we had to any urgent need or projected need to increase the number of classroom spaces in order to accommodate the number of students that we would have on campus. It did cite, however, that some of the supplemental areas that you end up having as part of a school very much may need to be examined, conference rooms, other non-instructional spaces. So there was an acknowledgement of that in the enrollment study. As we potentially look forward to engage in a master planning process or any capital improvement that we may want to put before the community down the road, this probably suggests that we should look to renovating an existing space, if we're talking about classroom space design, as opposed to adding additional classrooms. Obviously, that doesn't account for anything else we may want to consider if there's work related to the school, athletics, or work related to the arts. Obviously, that's not included in this particular enrollment study, so that's something for us to consider. I did want to pause there to see if there were any questions. And
yeah, I have a question. What would, roughly that's 1%, I suppose, of our student body. What would have been a number that would have given you pause? Like if you had seen 2%, 3%?
Yep. So as we look through the enrollment per grade level, Sean, if we saw that we were significantly off in any one of these grade levels, that would have given us pause. So the most significant we are off, I think, is a total of 4 students, maybe 5 in one of the grade levels. So if we were looking at something at a grade level that would be closer to 10, 15, something like that, that certainly would. Or if the migration trend, which is a calculation they use for the number of students who are coming in and the number of students you're losing each year, what the net trend is, positive or negative, through these grade levels, because this impacts us in particular when we have students coming into 9th grade. We tend to have more students coming into 9th grade because garrison students are coming over. If those figures in the migration ratios were significant as well, that would be reflected there, but they're not. We're typically within 1% or so, and if we saw that in the 3-4% range, that would give us pause.
And my other question would be that our expectation, even though we're going to be doing a year-over-year review, would be that this was a one-time occurrence because of COVID, but if we saw a 1% increase over time, then we would adjust.
That would have to be adjusted, and that's why it's important to review this each year to make sure that we're staying attuned to it, and that if we were to see something over time, gradual increases can add up, as you're noting. I will say that the further you go out from when the study was completed, the less accurate the study will be. Right. So as we get to the 4th or 5th year, even though in the study a 10-year projection was provided, really around year 4 and 5, we want to reconsider having Western Suffolk BOCES come back in, reevaluating our plan, and updating their figures. So we'll have another very current 5-year projection after that. So even though they provide a 10-year projection, having them come back and look at our enrollment figures and engaging in a modified study would be appropriate. It's just good housekeeping at that point after 4 or 5 years or so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say I'll be very interested to see what happens like 2 years from now, because it may be just me. It feels like there are a lot more strollers I'm like, of people I don't recognize. So there may be people who are not yet in kindergarten.
Correct.
But that bump. So, but that being said, I would suspect that the overall trend will be consistent, which is longer term enrollment decrease just because of birth rates and population and all that sort of stuff. So maybe we get a little spike if there are indeed more pre-kindergartners moving in this last 18 months, 9 months, whatever it may be. But then it will continue to go. That wouldn't surprise me.
I just think it's such valuable information. I'm so glad that we, as a board, asked to do it a couple of years ago, and that it happened, and that we revisited it, and Dr. Benante led the revisiting process to make sure that it was still legitimate information. I bet other school districts were doing something similar. I think it's so valuable as we look towards the future. There's so many things we can't plan for, right? But if what we can plan for is so helpful. So I'm glad we did that, and thank you, Dr. Benante,
No problem.
for
And
ushering it through.
thank you. With that, that concludes my remarks, Jen.
Okay. So we go into our communication from the public. I'll just read our statement here. The Haldane Board of Education desires and values input from the entire school community. For those who wish to address the board, please sign in with the district clerk and state your name. Please keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. Disparaging remarks and discussion of district personnel are prohibited. Although we do not engage in dialogue, we are listening. Please leave your contact information with our district clerk, and you will have follow-up from the board president or the superintendent as appropriate. So, is there any communication from the public at this time? Okay. So going into information reports, these are here for our review. And then going into consent agenda minutes. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? These are from our August 24th business meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda financial. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
I just did want to mention, Jen, that included in the, as one of the financial items was mentoring support for Mr. Cowan. Dave Goddard, who was one of our interim athletic directors last year for a brief period of time, has agreed to serve as a mentor for Dan Cowan. And I think this is really one of the excellent facets of how we've approached our support of new administrators on our district. This existed prior to me, that we've always provided a high level of mentoring support to our new administrators, regardless of whether or not they're new to administration. If they're new to Haldane, it's important to have a level of support anytime you transition into a new school community. So we're fortunate to have Mr. Goddard, who has a wealth of experience, not only within Section 1, but also at the state level, to support Mr. Cowan through this school year.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the CSE, CPSE recommendations. Ms. Platt?
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendation of the Committee on Preschool Special Education and Committee on Special Education as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Our workshop topics. Ms. Platt?
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby adopts the workshop topics for 2021-2022 as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
I will read these just because those who are at home don't have this in front of them, so I'll just call them out. Our first workshop meeting would be next week, which will be the multi-tiered student support plan. And then the October workshop meeting would be Curriculum and Human Resources Update by Mr. Elder, right? Mr. Elder. November workshop meeting is an arts update, which is new. We haven't had that before, and thank you. I think it was Sean or somebody brought that up to say, hey, let's do that. So looking forward to that. December is the elementary school report. January is the middle school report. February is the special education update. March is the high school and athletics report. April will be a campus master planning update. More on that to come. And May is our usual vote and election. And June is our strategic coherence plan update. So it's jam-packed. Once in a while, we have something that comes up that we need to add in, but that's a good outline, I think. Any further discussion on the workshop topics? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. This is to dissolve the Health and Safety Committee. Ms. Platt?
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby dissolves the Health and Safety Committee with all remaining responsibilities to be transferred to the district-wide safety team.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
So, Dr. Benante, would you just speak to this just a little?
I just wanted to underscore what Catherine mentioned in the resolution, that the majority of the responsibilities associated with the Health and Safety Committee are now covered by the district-wide safety team. Those that are not, we determine likely would be covered by the Wellness Committee, in particular to the health-related items that typically were discussed at Health and Safety. So it was becoming a bit redundant to have two teams whose primary areas of oversight overlapped. It's now New York State regulation to have a district-wide safety team, so you've acted on the creation of that group. So I'm recommending now at this point that this team be abolished, or this committee, excuse me.
Yeah, and this kind of streamlining, I think, is something we're always looking at, right? With committees specifically, making sure that we're really using our time efficiently and the administration and all the volunteers' times efficiently. So this makes a lot of sense to me. Any further discussion?
I have a question. Just do we anticipate there are any individuals who were sort of long-time sitting members of this committee who will be moving over to wellness or moving over to?
Disappointed that they're not getting the email.
I
from the Health
they
and
want to be in
Safety
a committee.
I don't
So-
believe so. I will, when I first arrived at Haldane, the Health and Safety Committee was quite active. I recall the first meeting I had, there must have been upwards of close to 24 individuals who came to that first meeting. And then I think but there was the active list, if you were to look at the active committee list, which had not been culled in some time, I think we had close to 30 or 40 individuals who actually were receiving the invitation to the Health and Safety Committee each time we met. So that in and of itself was in need of re-examining. Once we made the transition to Alteris as our primary safety and security consultant, many of the individuals who I think had concerns and were coming saw that the district's new approach, had a level of confidence in the district's new approach to addressing health and safety related matters on campus and stopped attending. So our attendance has been low since that time, and we will provide a notification to our existing listserv, which we think has everybody who may have attended the meeting probably in the last 10 years, to inform them that we have made this transition. Most seem to be familiar, just in passing seem to be familiar, and we're understanding of the need to revisit this if we were going to have streamlined some of the matters, as Jen said, that we were reviewing, and also had a level of confidence with some of the work that's been done in the years since with Alteris, or having Alteris's expertise in the room. And I also think Mr. Falloon was appointed as the parent rep, which I'll say is almost like a community rep in many ways. Mr. Falloon has been an active participant on both committees throughout, so he stayed the course, which isn't a criticism at all to those who had come in, but I think Mr. Falloon is very well connected within the community to the others who had been attending, many of whom worked in law enforcement or EMS or emergency services. So Ralph is a great liaison to those individuals, and so I feel like we've covered our bases here.
Good question, there, Sean. Thank you for that. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, going into the approval of charges to the district committees. Ms. Platt.
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby reauthorizes the charges to the following district committees for 2021-2022: Buildings and Grounds, Code of Conduct, Technology, and Wellness.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Is there any discussion?
I had a question actually in reading through the Technology Advisory Committee charge, because the long-term technology plan was used. I was like, I don't know what that is. So what's the long-term technology plan?
Yeah, so the district's required to have a technology plan, a 3-year technology plan that is reviewed by the board on a continual basis and that's submitted to SED that covers certain, very specific areas as outlined in a template that's provided to us by the State Education Department. You may recall that Leah, when we had Leah provide a technology update, I believe last year, my sense of that may be a little off, might have been the year before, she alluded to the revision of, as part of that presentation, she alluded to the revision of the technology plan. I'm forgetting just off the top of my head, John, where we are within that 3-year period, but you can expect that at some point you'll have an update on the technology plan and be
does
acting on
that
it.
committee help in the development of
It
the
does.
plan and then the implementation, or oversee
Certain
the
parts of the
implementation?
implementation, some are more internal
Yeah,
and
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah.
necessarily be facilitated by the committee as much as an individual
Okay.
on the committee who works for the district.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Has that always been the case, or am I misremembering? I feel like it was somehow connected to like the Smart Schools Bond Act. Is that totally not true?
There's probably a relevant piece there, but off the top of my head, I'm not
Sure.
sure.
I couldn't hear your question exactly. They're two different things.
Okay, the long-term technology plan is not connected to the Smart Schools Bond Act. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead, Maggie.
Yes, I have a little concern. I've already shared with Dr. Benante via email, but the process by which the parent and the family representatives chosen for each committee, that's through the PTA, a PTA recommendation. And I just wanted to make sure, I'm not sure that this is the most inclusive way to get the best representation of Haldane families. And I was just wondering, is there another way, an email blast or something? Because I know that there's a lot of families who don't know that these spots might be open to them, if that makes sense, so.
Yeah, so I'm glad Maggie brought that up. As far as from where the administration sits, where I sit, these are charges that are developed and approved by the Board of Education, and at some point, as you can see on some of the revision histories, these go back quite some time. And the participation on each committee is defined in the charge. So a teacher of a particular subject area or an individual as recommended by someone in a leadership position, and I think there's allusions to PTA, also faculty association leadership in here. So really, I see it as once these are approved by the board, it's the administration's responsibility to engage in the process then of securing these individuals. So if the board desired for the administration to broaden participation in any way or alter, who we liaise with, that would have to come from the board in order for me to do it.
So just so I'm understanding, so each of these committees, they're all worded slightly different, but there's a parent representative on each of the committees, sometimes multiple, 2 or 3. And all of the parents, from what I can tell of all 4 of these committees, are selected by the PTA.
Yeah, so you'll see a little language, something along the lines of parents will be recommended to the superintendent by the PTA, teachers will be recommended by the HFA, which is the Faculty Association or Teachers Union.
And the board
Board
liaison is
liaisons
selected by
coming
us.
through the board, obviously. So, which is understandable. I think, we would typically look to those supporting organizations or groups that we liaise with more regularly to make those recommendations, because ideally these are the individuals who are then going back to that body, right, and reporting out. But at the
And
same
Maggie,
time,
your question or comment is having the PTA recommend the parents the most inclusive process, and should it be more of a, call out to all Haldane parents to be a part of the, to be a part of the committee, who would like to be part of the committee. Yeah, I don't know how the PTA does their call-outs.
Right, what's the process?
I don't know what their process is.
No, and it's not a knock on the PTA, which does amazing
course,
work every
yeah.
single day, obviously. And I understand the aspect of streamlining, right? Like, it's a streamlining process for you guys as well. But I just feel like, there are some people, or some families who want to volunteer. Maybe they don't necessarily want to be a part of the PTA. They're not a part of the PTA. I just, I was thinking if there was just a more open way to advertise, hey, these positions.
So I would say that's a question my first question would be to the PTA of how do you go about selecting parent representatives? Because certainly the PTA, I don't have any idea if they just reach out to their membership or if the PTA is reaching out to a broader group, or if the PTA is just tapping somebody on the shoulder and saying, hey, can you please go do this committee? I have no idea how it's working. So I would say the first thing to figure out for me would be to learn how the PTA does what they do. Unless anybody here knows how the PTA does what they do.
No, and I'm a
I've
PTA
just
member.
observed that it seems to be, individuals who occupy a particular place on the committee, and they return year after year if they so choose, but that might be something that is carefully discussed with the PTA about it too, so, yeah.
I mean, Maggie raises a really good point, right, about making sure that, people, that, there's equitable opportunities for people to join these committees. And I think Jen's point is a good one of well, so how does the PTA do this? I guess the other thing I would point out, and correct me if I'm wrong, is people can attend to listen in on the meetings, right? So you don't have to be a member of the committee to attend as an observer. So that's one way, at least, to give access to the information. I mean, it's a tricky, it's an interesting problem. I mean, because on the one hand, it's a real responsibility, right? And so it feels like it's appropriate to have some kind of process that identifies parents that have indicated a level of, a level of engagement. But I think really the first place to start probably is to find out how the PTA does this. I mean, I think the other thing, and I think it's okay for me to say this, is one of the things the board is trying to do, and Maggie, I don't know if we talked about this in any of the meetings you've either watched or attended, is trying to figure out a way to be more systematic about establishing these committees and providing them with a charge. And so this is really the first time, I don't know. I mean, so it feels like that's an important part of this piece. I mean, because being a member of the PTA isn't exorbitantly expensive, but you do have to be a parent that pays the fee, and do parents know that being a member of the PTA is actually the process through which you have access to being on these committees. And so those are all important things to consider.
The other thing to think about is, the PTA, the leadership of the PTA. It's not static. It changes, and they get new parents in who might not necessarily know. When we're talking about a committee where it makes sense to have a parent or a representative with a level of expertise, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was just thinking about that process a little bit.
Right, and is it that people raise their hand and volunteer, or is it that people are asked? And I have no idea. So maybe the first place to start, I mean, I do feel like we should approve these committee charges tonight because we want to get the committees in motion. But perhaps a good next step would be to reach out to the PTA just to learn some more information, and then we can revisit if the board wants to make a change to the charge. We can do that.
Right, I mean, because you could imagine that there's a different way to do it, right? That the elementary principal puts out a call or something like this. But I agree with Jen that the best thing for us to do, because these committees are important, is to get them up and running, and that's something for us to think about this year. I think that makes sense.
So I'll even put it on my to-do list, okay? I will reach out to the PTA president
It could be as simple as them playing the filtering mechanism, and you
Yeah.
do an outreach and say, the PTA makes a recommendation. Anybody can sit on these committees. PTA membership is not required, but if you're
Correct.
interested, write a 3-sentence.
But the
Reason-
PTA organizes it, or does the call
Yeah,
out,
they're
or does
doing the collation and the filtering because they're a key point of outreach to parents.
Yeah,
Yeah, so there's something.
But if you're making it clear that, yeah.
right. Okay, so I'll reach out to the PTA president and circle back with information, and we'll take it from there. Does that sound good? Okay. All right, so, thank you, Maggie, for bringing that up. Are we all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So the designation of the Board of Education members to the district committees. Do we have to vote on this? May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, so I'm just going to read this aloud because those at home might not be following along. And just for confirmation. So the audit committee, which we have already approved, was as Sean and John. Buildings and grounds is Maggie. Code of conduct is Peggy. District-wide safety team, which replaces the health and safety team, is Maggie. Technology is John. Wellness is Sean. Policy is Peggy and I. Labor management is Sean and I. The visitation committee has not been determined just because we haven't scheduled that yet, but that's on our agenda. That's really all of us, because we all go to it. And negotiations are Sean and John. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Moving on to our goals. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Oh, we're not really voting on this, are we? We're just discussing.
I'm sorry.
Never mind, we don't need to
Yeah,
motion, we don't need to second. This is discussion. So here are the draft of the goals. I didn't get any feedback from anybody via email, so I'm assuming that means everybody's pretty comfortable with them, but does anybody have any, go ahead,
I
Peggy.
thought I replied and said.
You
I thought
did.
they were
Peggy
good.
said they were good. Peggy was the only person who said they're good. So does anybody have anything they would like to add? These were, for the public's knowledge, these were discussed at our retreat. There is some repetition from last year, the things we're working on, continuing to work on, and some new things. Basically, the new item is customizing that self-evaluation tool, which we thought would be a good idea. And we also talked about the onboarding, the new board member onboarding process as being kind of a constant thing to look at throughout the year. And I don't know if I volunteered, John and Maggie, or you volunteered yourselves, but the idea of like a seasoned board member and a new board member working together on that as a little mini informal committee sounded like a good idea. And something to just stay in touch with throughout the year. And we talked about the self-evaluation tool as something to look at in the second half of the year, when we get to evaluation time.
Great.
So these will be on the agenda next week for us to vote on. So if anybody has anything they'd like to shift or amend, speak up between now and then. Okay. Discussion of district goals. So same deal. These are here for us to look at again, and they will be on next meeting's agenda to approve. We discussed these at our retreat. I don't believe there was any feedback in terms of things that needed to be changed. Phil, Dr. Benante, did you have any
I
extra comments
included
you wanted to share?
some examples of evidence of
Yes,
effectiveness. I wouldn't say examples, but items I would look to provide the board as evidence of effectiveness as to whether the goal was reached or not come the end of the year. So that was something we did discuss at the retreat. I also received a question regarding the master planning work and how would we know whether or not it would encompass the community's shared values and what the process would be towards that. So I realize that I certainly understand the question, and I thought it was a good one just for the board and any community member who may be watching to understand, because I don't want to get too far ahead here. But next week, Tim's going to present to the board a request for proposals for the development of a campus master plan to engage an architect or designer, whoever who has experience in this area, to come and work with the district to develop such. It is our expectation, and it's embedded into the RFP, that whatever entity is awarded the bid will have a process for engaging the community prior to developing the design of a campus master plan. So that process would be the process that we would expect to be, or to look to, if you will, to define what areas of shared value the community has that they can then incorporate in any space design as part of the master planning process. So there's additional things the administration can do to further support that work, but we would wait to see who we're working with before we would get into the intricacies and the development of that. Both Tim, Ann, and I would all envision walking through this at each phase with the board to make sure that we had your support. It was being done in a way that you felt was important to the community, or reflective of the standard of expectation that you would have or the community would have for the work before we would then sought out to engage. It's such important work and forms a basis for the district's planning efforts for years to come. We want to make the process is really important at this point. So I just wanted to speak to that and mention that in case there were any other questions.
Yeah, and I think the looking to the strategic coherence plan as an example makes a lot of sense, since we've all just gone through that. The thought exchanges,
Right.
the opportunities for meetings and feedback and webinars and et cetera. There was certainly a wide range of opportunities for people to get involved, and a real collection and culling of people's feedback.
Right.
So I imagine that would be a model for the campus master plan.
And it's, is it, because we had the thought exchange and in a way it was not independent of the coherence, the strategic coherence plan, but in a way we had, they weren't necessarily part of the same company that we were working through. And so my question would be, is there a way for us, as we're thinking about that RFP, or as we're looking, because once the RFPs are there, we have a legal obligation to take the, the lowest bid. Is there a way for us to emphasize, or our expectation that this community component be sophisticated, or is there a way for us to set a bar for that?
It's embedded into, and just correct me, are we required to take the lowest bid on an RFP such as this? Right, so just I wanted to clarify that, Sean, which I think is a good thing, right? Because to your point, but when we establish a group to review the proposals, I think that's another point where we're going to want multiple people in the room, not just me, Ann, and Tim. That's a critical component that we'll be looking for, a group that has experience doing this, whether it be in a K-12 or university setting, but also has an established approach to engaging the community that's reflective in the work that they've already done.
Okay, so those will be on next week's agenda. If anybody has any more feedback or thoughts or questions, make sure you share them along the way. Okay, so the next item, we talked about public comment a little bit at our retreat, just trying to make sure that the public comment, which is not required by state law, but is important to us as a school district, that we're making sure that it's effective and doesn't interrupt the business of the board, but is still an opportunity for people to speak. And so we were talking about that a bit at our retreat. And then at the Westchester Putnam School Boards Association's board officer training that I was at, a suggestion came up that I hadn't thought of that I wanted to share with you guys, just since it was kind of fresh, which was, we have two public comment sections. And one board in Westchester, what they do is they have their first public comment section be just for comments on the special presentation that was just given, or on any pending agenda items, so that people can speak to something we're going to vote on later in the meeting before we vote on it. And then the second public comment section is really the catch-all. It's for the anything. It could be on the special presentation just later, or just something else. So that the first public comment section has some parameters so that the meeting can keep humming along. And, you know, we've done that informally before, like after a special presentation, we've said, does anybody have any questions about what they just heard about? Right? But it might be, I don't know, I thought it sounded like a good idea. So I'm just throwing it out there to you guys. We don't have to decide on it right now. But if you want to just consider it, it might be a way to streamline our public comment attempts on our agenda. So it would require just a slight shift in how the agenda reads. But there you go. So I don't know if you guys have any initial thoughts, or you can just think about it and we can revisit.
So I feel like I should know this, but I don't. That first one typically comes after after the superintendent's comments and after in a workshop meeting after a workshop topic,
Right, after the special presentation,
after the special presentations.
right.
I like that idea. I think it's a good idea. I think it's a really good idea.
So that just the general comments, if somebody just wanted to come in and talk about something that wasn't on the agenda,
Yep.
it wouldn't happen in the beginning of the meeting. That would be held till the
Right.
end of the meeting.
Right.
And it would really kind of direct the comments so that if anybody had something to say that they wanted to share as information for us and perhaps feedback or influence for us on something we were about to vote on, they could do that at that time, too. So why don't you guys think about it? We can revisit, okay? And the last item is our building walkthrough. So it looks like we are tentatively scheduled to do this next meeting at 6 p.m. And this is an annual commitment, and we basically get a walkthrough of the facilities. Tim and Ann are usually there, and Dr. Benante, and they walk us through anything that's changed over the summer, any upgrades or any issues. And it is a requirement that we do it, and we do tend to do it in the beginning of the year. So I guess the question, Dr. Benante, is this a good time for everybody?
6 o'clock next Tuesday, work for the group.
Yes?
That's for me. Yeah.
Yes? It works for me. Yes? Good enough, yes, okay. And if you can't get there right at 6 and you scoot in a little late, it's okay, we'll tell you where we are. So it looks like that's a committed yes.
And remind me, that's a requirement? That's a legal requirement? Is a committee, remind me how it's a
Policy, I
requirement?
It's
A visitation committee is a policy requirement.
yes.
Okay,
And
there
I
we go.
think the way that we've implemented the policy requirement by having the requirement of the visitation committee, because we've never had like a separate visitation
Right,
committee.
right.
We just all sort of serve as the committee. Oh, actually, no, it's the requirement is actually that every school building be visited.
Right, and for us,
Yeah.
it makes sense to do that
Yeah.
as a one-time tour around.
Yep.
As a
So it's
group.
a policy that we
That's right.
have. Okay, great.
That's right,
Great.
that's right. Okay, so is there any communication from the public at this time? Are there any board reflections to share?
It occurred to me that, this was something that we added last year when we revised the agenda, and I didn't know if sort of Maggie knew what was appropriate for us to share. I don't know if we ever addressed what this should or shouldn't be with our new board member.
Oh, let's tell Maggie what board reflections means. Go ahead. Sean, please.
What's that mean? No, I just put out there that, this is we noted that we didn't have a time in which should something come up in the course of the meeting that we felt, we wanted to say or wanted to add, or we had a particular experience in which we wanted to either, shout out and raise the roof to the district in some sort of way. This might be our opportunity to do so.
Right. So it could be agenda related. Like, oh my gosh, I forgot to say when we were talking about this in the beginning of the meeting, blah, blah, blah. Or it could just be, I just want to shout out to my son Will, who did this amazing thing in his fifth grade
that?
class.
That's right.
So it could be more personal, or it could be agenda related. And it's the same idea for Dr. Benante's superintendent's final thoughts, is that sometimes Dr. Benante wants to add something from the agenda, and sometimes he wants to just chit-chat with us, which is also cool.
I'll also tie it back to if there's a comment, since we don't engage.
Oh, thank you.
sometimes
Yes,
with
good.
anyone who's speaking here during our communications, that would be the time also for me to address,
Good.
if desired,
Good, yes,
something that came up and provide clarification to
good.
the
I have
community.
one last question, and this is just, did I miss it? Were we going to talk about the human resources audit, or did that get pushed? The human resources audit?
Human resources
Was
audit.
that-
As a workshop topic,
Oh, no, I thought it was in our agenda, maybe not.
I think I mentioned it in the Friday report.
Yes, in the
Right.
Friday report.
As a workshop topic.
If I did, I didn't include it on one as our list, but
No, it is. I think.
well, I have a human resources update, but the audit will not be complete by October.
Oh.
But we'll get an update at some point. Or just-
Yes,
just- no,
yes.
Yeah, I was just
Uh,
curious.
Thank you. No, thank you, Maggie, for bringing it up. And I apologize for not including it on the workshop topic, or at least a notation.
No, you did. It says October 19th, Curriculum and Human Resources.
Right, but the
update.
audit will not be completed by the 19th.
Right.
So Josh will provide a general overview of some human resource matters that are of pertinent,
Okay.
that are pertinent as of that moment. But the audit will likely be completed by the spring, just in speaking with the gentleman who will complete the audit, and a report will be provided to the board. So whenever that is complete, we'll make sure that the board has it and an overview is provided to the board. And this has come up at times before, as Jen, I think, alluded to, that sometimes things come up during the year. We can have multiple presentations as part of whether it be a workshop agenda. We can even include it on a business agenda, no different than I did tonight. I'll try to limit that. So you'll have an overview of what was found in that.
Great. Dr. Benante, do you have any final thoughts you would like to share?
I do not.
I would like to make a motion to adjourn. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good.
Let's stay.
Any opposed and really
Aye,
wants to
let's-
stay?